Let me start over again. All right. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. This is one of those technical things where I thought everything was tested and it didn't work out. So, Charlene Lee here, and I'm going to be talking about today about disagree and commit and why it's such an important and passionate topic for me. We're now 2 weeks after the US election. And one of the things that we have seen here in the country is that half the country has voted for one candidate, and another half of the country has voted for another candidate. And we so passionately believe that the candidate that we voted for is absolutely right. And we think the other half is completely crazy. So yet we do this every 4 to 8 years. We do this all the time as a democracy. We're able to disagree completely and then turn around and for the most part have a fairly peaceful transition. And I think we all breathe a big sigh of relief here in the US that nothing drastic, no huge protests have really sprung out because we understand this is how democracy works. And I can't think of a more disruptive thing that we do than to do this every 4 to 8 years. And this brings me to the topic for today, which is how do we actually disagree? How do we do this well? How do we commit to the change, even if we just don't believe in it? And I get it because 4 years ago, the candidate I supported didn't make it. She didn't get the votes that she needed in the right places. And even though I was incredibly disappointed, I committed to our new president, even though I disagreed vehemently with what he said. And I wish him the best of luck because our country needed it. And so I get it. I get what that strong sense of disappointment is right now that half the country is going through. So what I want to do is talk a little bit about what it means to disagree and commit. Just share with you some of the research, some of the best practices I've seen, and also how we can go about doing this. So just want to take a moment to say hello to folks. So thank you, Jay, for letting me know that there's sound. Great to see you. Barak, thank you for joining. James, thank you so much for joining again. And Beth, thank you for saying that we've all been there. No worries. We know what it's like, right? So thank you for that empathy. And Ania, thank you for joining too as well. So please share where you're coming from. And if you can, share also some examples where you've had to disagree and then turn around and commit. What was it like? What was that disagreement? How hard was it to disagree? And then to turn around, if it wasn't your idea that went out, how did you actually turn around and be committed to this? So let's get into this. The reason why I think it's so important is that if we don't disagree well, you don't get the best ideas. This is why the most disruptive organizations really say, I want everyone to have a strong idea, to have a strong point of view. I'll give you an example of an organization I was working with. They were trying to go through a digital transformation. And one of the core beliefs they had as an organization was respect. And it's a great idea because originally when the founder created the company, he said, everyone has a voice. We need to have respect for each other, to not just ignore each other, to really develop relationships and have respect. Over time, this morphed to being, we had to be in 100% agreement. We couldn't disagree face to face because that would be disrespectful. And so it had morphed to the point that nobody felt like they could speak up and really be honest about what they thought was going on. And as a result, their pace of innovation and change and a capacity for doing this was diminishing over time. And they realized they had to renew what it meant to be respectful, that they had to change this belief and come up with new ways of thinking about things. So one of my favorite principles of leadership comes from Amazon. And it is this. It's this one of their leadership principles. I think it's number 12. Have backbone, disagree, and commit. And I want to tear it apart a little bit because this is such an important thing about how Amazon actually works and how I think for many of us as leaders, we don't spend enough time on actually not how to get agreement, but how do we disagree really, really well. So I thought I'd put up exactly what Amazon, how they describe this. So they say, leaders are obligated to respectfully challenge decisions when they disagree, even when doing so is uncomfortable or exhausting. And the way that they actually put it is, we don't want to have to worry about the social fabric and it being putting it at risk, because we know we're strong enough as a team, as an organization, that we can actually disagree. And they go on and they say at Amazon, these leaders, we do not compromise for the sake of social cohesion. Once a decision is determined, they commit wholly. So let's break this apart a little bit. Jeff Bezos, back in 2016, in his shareholder letter, wrote about what disagree commit meant. And he gave a very tangible example where he talked about how Amazon Studios, their new group that made movies, was coming in and said, we've got this new idea. And Jeff Bezos just thought it was absolutely the wrong thing to do. Too complicated, way too many risks. You could do so many other things. Why do this? And he says, I completely disagree with you on this. But then he looked at the team and he realized they had a whole slew of Emmys and Academy Awards. And he goes, well, you guys know what you're doing. So I'm going to disagree, but I'm going to be completely committed to what you are doing here. So this is what he said. He said, I disagree and commit and hope it becomes the most watched thing we've ever made. And he also said this one other really interesting insight. He said this: consider how much slower this decision cycle would have been if the team actually had to get his agreement versus his commitment. This is the most interesting insight, I think, from all of the work that Amazon has shared around what disagree and commit means. This is not just about how do we disagree, but it's also the reason why to do this. It is because if you try to get to agreement from everybody, you're spending a lot of time and energy for something that you may not actually need. Why try to get someone to agree with you when what you really want is their commitment? So don't confuse the two. Again, think about what we're going through here in a very tangible way here in the United States. We're not asking the other group to be in agreement with us. We're actually saying, are we committed to building a stronger society? Are we committed to making our country as strong as possible? Are we committed to each other to move forward, no matter what the outcome is? And this is not about finger pointing at the end. It's about how do we actually start closing the gap that is so big that needs to be there. So I want to take a moment and to see if there are any other comments here. So thank you, Raymond, for joining. Maru also. And one person says, I don't see anyone on the other side moving forward. We'll talk about that. And I just want to remind people, we're 2 weeks out. There's a reason why there's a long transition time for the team to get ready, but also for us to get used to this idea. This is, again, not an easy process. RN Verma, thank you very much for joining all the way from Mumbai in India. So I want to move on and talk a little bit about what it means to actually have background, disagree, and commit. So let's talk about have a background. First of all, this is about taking a stand. This is about making sure that you're really clear about where you are, because it's very difficult to disagree with somebody if they don't have a point of view. It's as if, okay, well, I don't want to put myself out there too far. Maybe I can't really disagree with everyone. And you want to be able to take a stand, have that strong point of view. It's one of the most important things I learned as a new budding analyst when I was at Forrester. It was drilled into my head. Have a stand, make the call. People aren't asking you to give a percentage chance that something will happen or not. Make the call, take a strong stance in something you believe in. Do the research until you're sure this is what you think is going to happen. So take that stand, have that background. So the question to ask yourself is, in your organization, are leaders encouraged to have that strong point of view? Are they encouraged to plant their feet down, express it very clearly what they have, and be willing to disagree with each other? Are you encouraging these divergent point of views to come up? Or are people doing just the opposite? Are they hedging their bets? So waiting to see where the water flows and they'll go in that direction. That's not a great way to move forward because everyone is waiting for everyone else to see what's happening, or they're waiting to see what happens with their leader before they commit to anything. Again, I do believe that we're stronger as organizations when we have diverse points of view. So, how do we actually do this? How do we disagree now, which is the second part here? And this is about having a strong relationship and knowing that even though you could be totally against each other in a point of view, you can walk out of the room and still be good friends. That relationship can still be strong. One of my favorite examples of this is the relationship between two of the Supreme Court justices who have both passed away, unfortunately. That's Anthony Scalia and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And you could not find two people on more opposite, diametrically opposed points of view of how they thought the world and how the law works. And the two of them fought it out. They just fought it out in court, really disagreed with each other, wrote these scathing opinions for and against their points of views. And outside of it, they were best buddies. They were great friends. They were united in their passion for family, for opera in particular. And yet, when they got to work, man, the fireworks were going off. And I think that's what disagreement really looks like. If you want to see how true disagreement works inside of organizations, we can have completely diametrically points of view, but then we're still good with each other. And that's really hard to do. And the only way I've ever been able to see that is when you work really hard on making sure there's a relationship on the other side. So, to the point that we made earlier from someone about we're not seeing the other side moving, this is again not trying to get the other side to move to your point of view. It's not about convincing them. It's about saying, is our relationship strong enough? Do we have enough respect for each other to see that we're committed to be able to move forward together to create a better outcome? So I think one of the things that I do believe that we last part to do is how do we commit? How do we actually commit to something when we don't agree with it? And this is probably the most important thing to make sure that's happening inside of your organization. And that is, if people disagree, are they coming along because they're expected to? And they do what I call sandbagging, where the person is saying, well, I agree, but I'm going to drag my feet. I'm not really in agreement with you. I'm going to do everything possible here, maybe not to actively undermine you, but I'm sure I'm not going to help you succeed. And think about how that works in terms of the organization. That means you're still harboring a lot of bad will, that your idea wasn't chosen. But imagine if it was your idea was chosen, would you want the other people to be doing that too as well? Would you want them to be 100% committed? Because this is the true sign of commitment, that even if you think the idea is wrong, let's make it and work our hardest to make it work. And then therefore, we're not in the end not going to say, well, it didn't work because we didn't work hard enough. It didn't work because the idea wasn't the right one. Let's go back now and try a different idea. So this is something that's very different. And I think probably the hardest thing as a leader to do. And that is, are you demonstrating times when you disagree and you agree to disagree, but then you move forward and give 100% commitment to something? Are you going back and saying, well, I told you so that this wouldn't work, versus saying, we made this decision. We're going to move forward with it, see if it works, 100% committed. If it doesn't, we'll come back and try another idea. And it's okay to have that disagreement, but then always have that commitment behind it too as well. So I love this, a couple topics that are here. So Tasha actually says, I think people need to have different opinions while still respecting the other person. And I think this is, again, thank you for sharing that, Tasha. That's such a great point to have. Here's another one from Raymond. Disagreements are part of the tools towards building a middle ground. Again, thank you for sharing that. And then also coming here from Andrew, early thoughts. Well, it's great to imagine two sides moving together. We also need leadership to model what moving along looks like for both sides. And fantastic segue into my point here is, how do you show up as a leader? How do you demonstrate this? I'll show you one of the things that Jeff Bezos actually said. Um, this is something that he often says as a leader. He says, "Look, we agree on this, but can you take a gamble with me on it? Can you disagree and commit?" It's actively using these words, using this idea. I know you don't agree with me, but come along for the ride, see what happens, right? And this works especially in an organization when you realize that the decisions are reversible. You can always come back. 99% of the decisions we make are reversible. And so having the vulnerability and the strength as a leader to say, okay, I may not be right, but I'll commit. Or the idea I had wasn't right, and it's okay. I made a mistake. To be able to say that and to do that, in your because your relationship is so strong, is a sign of a strong leader. So I want to end up by talking about a few things that we can do to make sure that this happens. And I think the first one is to, first of all, let me just get it up, to build bridges and relationships. Because unless those relationships are there, unless the conversations are happening, it's really hard to disagree. Otherwise, you're just shouting at each other. And that is what's happening a lot these days in our organizations, but also in our society. I have members of my family who have completely different points of view from mine in terms of how we think we should be moving forward politically and as a society. And we literally sit there in disbelief, listening to each other. But because we're bound by love and family, we are okay with that. And we work really hard to make it safe to do the second thing, which is to encourage these divergent views. There's nothing worse than feeling you have to hide a part of yourself, to check a part of yourself at the door. It would be terrible for my family to feel like their points of view were not ever welcome. I welcome all of it. I welcome all of them and love them for the whole person that they are. Even though I vehemently disagree with them on some of these things, they wouldn't be that person if they didn't have those points of view. So, how do we do this at scale inside of our organizations and also in our society? It's about knowing that we are tied together with the same fate and the same outcomes. And that in order to be stronger together, we need to make sure these points of view are out there and that we have these difficult conversations. And my last point today is the hardest point, I think, or probably the most important, which is to listen with empathy and, very importantly, without judgment. When we are truly listening to people, listen with all our hearts, active listening, we're exercising curiosity and empathy to try to understand how that other person, what their point of view is. We're not being asked to agree with them. We're not being asked to necessarily take their point of view, but just to listen, to make sure they feel heard, to make sure they feel known. And so these are the tough tasks, I think, of being a leader these days, in that, especially with so many things going on, so much turmoil, but also so much opportunity for us to explore. These are the key things to have happen. So Douglas, thank you again. Absolutely. We feel we have to listen to this maximum. Listen to understand, not listen just to reply. And that's so wise. And thank you for sharing that, Douglas, because this is not about us listening to find the points of argument so that we can be right. It's really, truly listening so that we can hear things. Again, another comment from Andrew. The notion of commitment is important. Thank you. I'm glad you love it. It pushes acknowledgement around the disagreement, but to agree together that moving forward is critical. So thank you for that. RN, thank you for this comment. We agree to disagree, then only all possibilities to operate in tangible solutions do emerge. And a couple other great comments here from Andrew again. Jeff Weiner, when he was running LinkedIn, referred to managing with compassion. And again, for somebody who is at the top of the game, I love how Jeff Weiner, it just has such wisdom around being human. And the idea that you have compassion for the other person, even though they may be in a great disagreement with you, is important. So that's what I have for today. One of the things that I do encourage you to think about is, how do you disagree? So look for the next opportunity when you have a leadership moment. And again, remember, leadership is not about a title, it's about how you show up and create change. Think about the next meeting you have. How are you encouraging these divergent views to come forward? Encouraging people to have that strong backbone, take that point of view, so that you're arguing the best possible outcomes and solutions as clearly as possible. But then also think about how you're going to disagree. What are the relationships we have to have? Agree to disagree right from the very beginning, and then make sure that people are committing to each other regardless of the outcome. I wish you all the best on this journey. And thank you again for being part of the conversation here. I've got one last one here from Mike. Listening is vital to empathy. Such a great point. It's really hard to be empathetic to people if you're not actually listening to them. And Tasha, another great point. I find that if you repeat back what a person is saying, it helps me understand what they are saying and shows that I hear what they say. Again, fantastic practice around active listening, where it's not passively and you're just nodding your head. It's saying, like, this is what I heard you say. And then you say it back to them. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. I really appreciate you being here and being part of this conversation. I wish you all the best. Good luck disagreeing. I hope you have lots of disagreement in your life going forward, but I also hope that you find lots of commitment to people being able to move forward together. All the best to you and have a great day. Take care.